If I could live someone else's life, if I had a choice to live someone else's life, not to watch from afar, but to enter fully into the flesh and mind of another, I would not choose a great thinker, a conqueror, or an artist. I would choose a person whose name no one remembers. An ordinary, passable person, someone who lived unnoticed. And here's why. The great blinds. Fame deceives. In the biographies of the famous, we encounter only the peaks, sayings, discoveries, triumphs. But what is hidden between the lines? Who has seen a morning without inspiration, an evening without an answer, a night with an empty gaze at the ceiling? The life of the unknown is a revelation. Morning with tea in a cheap mug, a sad smile on the bus, deep thoughts that no one heard, simple joys that do not need applause. There is truth. There is a person. I would become one to understand what it is like to live without expectations of great things, what the heart thinks when no one demands it, what silence sounds like when there is no camera, no publication, no feeling of being someone special. I would have lived a day where a mistake would not become a scandal, where a tear would not be a quote, and love would not be a reason for books. And maybe that was when I realized that the meaning is not in recognition, but in the concept, in being, for real, without legends, without scenes, just being. After all, someone else's life is no more valuable than yours, but you can find mirrors in it, not for imitation, for understanding. I would wake up in his body, maybe somewhere in the suburbs, in a creaky apartment with the sun shining through the cheap curtains. The room smells of an old friend, coffee, and a little loneliness. No fanfare, just the breath of morning. He is an accountant or a driver, a teacher or a loader. His back hurts, but he does not complain. He has a habit of saying thank you to the machines, and he always leaves change in the cash registers for the next one. He did not save the world. He just lived. I go to his work. I hear the neighbors say hello, lazily, out of habit. Someone waves, and there is more humanity in this gesture than in thousands of subscribers. He does not write manifestos, but he knows how you listen. He does not fight for ideas, but he shares the last pie. And in this life, overheard, lived, unimportant from the outside, I begin to feel how time flows differently when you don't rush it, how you can be happy without proof, how silence with a loved one can mean more than 1,000 confessions. He is not perfect. Sometimes he is angry, sometimes he is afraid. He doubts, but there is no pretense in him. He is not a mask. He is real. And maybe that is why his life is worth living, because he does not play in the sense, he just goes to meet it. And when the day is over, I sit in his window. I look at the street where children draw with crayons, an old woman feeds pigeons. At this moment, there is nothing great, but there is everything. If I could live someone else's life, I would choose you. No one would notice, so that I could finally see my own. That night, I would fall asleep not in bed with my father or with recent philosophers, but on a slightly sagging mattress, under a blanket that smells of time. And sleep would not bring revelations, but simple, almost childish dreams about the sea where I have never been, about the voice of my mother who no longer hears. Waking up, I would not feel enlightened, but I would seem human, not in an abstract sense, but in the body that breaks in the morning, in thoughts that get tangled up too loudly in the world, in desires that do not shout, whisper, just live today. I would follow his paths. In the store for bread, near the parking lot, where the janitor tells something to the cat. I would hear the front door creaking, the children laughing, the heart beating when you meet someone you love. And suddenly I would understand. All the wisdom of the world is in this, not in understanding the secret of the universe, but in not passing by someone who is tired, not turning away from yourself, not betraying the silence in which historicity lives. I would live his life to find out. The value is not in the expectation, but in the sincerity, not in the scale, but in Switzerland, not in how much he left behind, but in how he was there when it was needed. And then, returning to myself, I would look. And perhaps for the first time, I would truly look into the mirror, not as an instrument of vanity, but as a window through which one can see another, and finally, oneself. Maybe we don't need to live someone else's life. We need to learn to live our own in a way that creates the most valuable life on earth, because that's what it is. And here I am, returning, not in another body, but in my own. And everything seems the same: the room, the reflection, the thoughts. But inside, someone has quietly drawn a line, not a bold one, final, light, like from a brush in a notebook of life. Now you know. I look at my hands and I don't want to be anyone else anymore. Not because I've become great, but because I've become attentive to myself, to what I think when no one is around, to the little things that I used to push away as unimportant. I go out into the street. The world is noisy as before. People hurry, argue, laugh, but now I see them differently. Each one is like a universe. Each one carries something imperceptible that screams without a sound, and this changes everything. I no longer look for other people's ways to justify my own. I don't envy or worship. I just go. And if someone says, "This life is worthless," I'll smile quietly, because I know that even the most insignificant day, lived with attention, is an eternity that you held in your palms. If I could live someone else's life, I would do it again, but not for the sake of substitution, for the sake of understanding, so that later, to live my own as the first, as the only one. Or maybe all this has already happened. Maybe you are not reading my story now, but someone else's place will become yours, at least for a moment. And understand, the life that you consider ordinary for someone would be a revelation. And if this is so, if I became you for even a moment, looked through your eyes, discovered your air, felt your shadow, sound, rare joys and quiet victories, then I understood the main thing. You are not an accident. You are not the background noise of existence. You are not a temporary body on the way to something greater. You are the greater. Even if you do not write books or save the world, you live, and that is harder. It requires courage, which is often lacking in the spirit of genius. You get up in the morning even if you don't want to. You care when you don't get care. You forgive when it's offensive to sit inside with sharp corners. You take one step at a time, even if no one applauds. And this is what I realized living someone else's life. It doesn't matter what body you were born in, who you became, and what you lost. As long as you feel, you are alive. As long as you are hurt by someone's tears, as long as you smile when the sun breaks through the clouds, you are a part of something great. It is not someone else's life that makes us human. It is the opportunity to touch the round, to stay with it, at least for the inner winter, to understand, not to judge, to be close without changing yourself. And if you ever want to be someone else, remember, someone else might already be dreaming of living your life for at least one day. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. And perhaps this is the greatest miracle of all. Or maybe this is where the truth lies, what we search for all our lives through books, roads, other people's words, and great thoughts. Not to become someone, but to be someone. Not an ideal, not a mask, not a role, but ourselves, with what we have, with broken dreams, with imperfect skin, with sleepless eyes, with longing, with hope, with the silence inside that we cannot escape. Living someone else's life, I realized. No glory, no wisdom, no power can compare to just being, with a full heart. Not out of fear, not out of habit, but out of gratitude. For every morning when you're still breathing, for every hello from a random passerby, for every I'm with you, even in a whisper, even in thoughts. If I were given a chance to live another life again, I would refuse. Not because it was bad, but because now I understand that the most important life is the one that was given to me. Not by chance, not on credit, not as a result, but as a gift. A gift which I underestimated for too long, hid behind desires to be better, higher, more needed, compared, condemned, corrected. But there was only one thing needed: to live, not like someone else, like me. And if you are now standing on the border, between yourself and someone else's image, between fading and hope, just stop. Listen. To yourself, to the world. The steps of life that are already walking next to you do not require correction. This is perhaps the most profound answer to the question, who would you like to be? It is someone who does not betray himself. And then someone else's life becomes not an escape, but a mirror. And yours is the most honest story, worth living to the end. And the further I go along this line of thought, the more clearly I understand. Life is not a story that someone has to approve, not a plot that needs to be printed. It is not a spectacle, not a showcase, not an item on the list of eternal races. It is a breath. It is a step. This look out the window on a rainy morning when the world seems empty, but suddenly, somewhere in Switzerland, warmth appears. We so often dream of another fate because we don't know how to truly embrace our own. It seems to us that other people's paths are brighter, that there is meaning, success, love, economics there. But for us, there is only routine, only everyday life, only repetition. But here's what I've learned. Living someone else's life, even for a moment, in every fate, there's a burden. In every body, there's pain. In every heart, there's a secret that's hard to live with. And if we could hear the inner voice of those we envy, we'd hear a plea. Please don't change with me. You don't know what you're asking for. And then, maybe, we would finally fall silent. And for the first time, we would hear ourselves, our rhythm, our path, without comparison, without fear that we will not live up to someone's expectations. Just be, live, learn not to be great, but to be alive. I am not a hero. I am not the chosen one. And maybe that is where my strength lies. Because I exist. Because you exist. Because every nothing special is, in fact, everything. If I were given a choice again, to live someone else's life or to stay in my own, I would choose mine, with its broken plans, statutory evenings, red flashes of happiness, and deep minutes of silence, because only in it am I real. And maybe, in the end, when the final line comes, this will be the only question that is really worth answering. Were you yourself? And if the answer is yes, then you have lived a life that no one else could have lived. And maybe this is that rare, precious understanding that came not through books or through someone else's experience, but only by going through your own path to the end, without embellishments, without montage cuts, without clips. We are afraid to live a small life. We are afraid to be invisible, unsuccessful, afraid that no one will remember us later. But is memory a measure of spirituality? Is the loudness of your steps a sign that you understood correctly? I think it's the other way around. The very beginning of life is the one that doesn't demand applause, the one that doesn't shout but whispers, the one that doesn't give a flag at the top but just gives someone a hand at the bottom. The lives that become light not from the outside but from the inside. And perhaps this is the hardest life. To be yourself when the whole world whispers, be someone else. Not to turn away when others run, not to beat yourself up for not being him, her, or them. When you finally accept your reflection, not as a project to be worked on, but as a living miracle that lives here and now, then the world falls silent for the first time. Then comes that deep silence in which you hear, for the first time, you are home. Not in someone's life, not in someone's destiny, in mine. And if one day someone asks you, what would you like to be if you could choose any life? You might just smile and say, to those who don't run, to those who live, to those who are me. And in this simple, almost quiet truth lies the fullness of being. There is no need to look for yourself in other people's biographies. There is no need to try on other people's masks, to chase other people's dreams. You are not mistaken, and you are not a draft. You are a finished work, living in the process. You are a path that no one but you can take. Life doesn't ask for support. It asks to be sincere, to be present, to feel, to stay close to yourself, even when it's scary, even when it seems like everything is lost. It's in those moments that you find what's always been there, your true self. I thought that you had to live someone else's life to understand something important, but now I know. To understand, you just have to be in your own until the end with an open heart. And maybe this is the greatest thing, to remain in a world where it is easier to be anyone but yourself. This is how the story ends, not the return. Not in a fictitious image, but in reality, in the silence where the most valuable sounds. I am, that's enough.